have everybody delivered.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, as you, the format is a little different. That Scott is not here tonight. He and Barb are to visit another congregation up in the northwest Portland area to just go up to do some pastoring and encouraging up there. Some of our friends up there, so we're missing that. So Scott tagged me to substitute for him. So if you were expecting Scott, I'm sorry about that, but get the next best thing. And then I have my lovely wife Sarah is with me, and we're going to kind of do our Bible study tonight, like we did last week, if you remember, with something more like a conversational format as opposed to staring at and reading a script on a Zoom screen. And so it looks like I'm looking at the screen. Sarah, tell me, why don't you say who's here? Hi, in case you don't know anybody, and give people a chance to say hello if they want to.
Yeah. So we have Mary there with Lisa.
So when she calls your name, just like wave, and if you want to say hi, go ahead and unmute yourself and say hi. If not, just wave or whatever. So.
Okay, and then we have Torrance Brian. No?
Hello, everybody.
Hey, T.
We have Abif Mejia from Mexico.
Hey, Beefy.
This is me. Bible study.
We have in Myanmar.
Hey, Brother Darren, good to see you. Well, we missed you last week. We prayed for you back, so we're glad you're feeling better.
We have Matt.
Matt is my friend from karate, so don't be mean to him with a karate chop, okay? So, hey, Matt.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Yeah, and first Thursday. So, yeah. And we have back. Was friend of Jose's, a connection from Jose.
Hey, Miriam, welcome back. Good to see you. Glad you're here tonight.
Hi, thank you so much.
Okay, and then Leah was there, but looks like.
Yeah, I saw her a little bit. So.
Oh wait,
Okay. We have to let her back in. There's the host. People back in. Kind of a strange situation. Got it?
Hey, really quick, is it just me? I hear like some background noise. Is it just me?
No, me too. I think it comes from Jack's audio. I don't know why.
When we get started, we're going to mute everybody, and then hopefully it'll go away. Because with like 12, 13 people, you get a lot of background noise. So if you're not saying hi or have a question, if you can go ahead and put the mute on so we don't get a lot of background noise, and then we'll see how it goes.
And don't be offended if I mute you.
Yeah, Sarah's the host, and if sometimes you forget, she may mute you anyway.
Okay, so then we also have Amelia is back now. So Amelia, I don't know if you also.
I don't know why my camera is not working. It's sad.
It was working.
Hi, everybody.
So it was working a minute ago. So hopefully, Good to see you. Hi, Amelia. Hi, Mia. Hi, Hector, or whoever's hanging out. Good to see you guys tonight. So
say hello.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, so everybody go ahead and throw the mute on so that way we don't get background noise. And then when I'll kind of talk a little bit and see how the volume is and just make sure you can hear everybody. So Beefy, how's the sound now? Are we getting the interference, or does it sound okay right now?
No, now it's better.
Okay, cool. Great. And then Tito's here too?
Yeah, and Tito just joined us.
Tito,
Hello.
Good to see you again, or good to hear you again. All right, so tonight we're carrying on the Bible study that Scott has been working on. If you've been a part of the Thursday nights, we've been working through the Gospel of Matthew. We've been working on Matthew 5, 6, and 7, which is kind of, well, the most famous sermon ever spoken or taught, which is called the Sermon on the Mount. And then we've been narrowing in for the past maybe month or so on especially, going through 5, going through 6, going through 7. This is a totally open discussion. If you have questions, feel free to ask a question. If you have comments, ask a comment, say it, speak it. Like Sarah's hosting, so you can kind of text her or something like that, or you can just raise your hand, or you can just unmute yourself and say hello. Because we're all on Zoom, so we're not in the same room, so we can't have the type of Bible study we would normally have, which is a lot of interaction and conversation and discussion and feedback and talking. And so really feel free to do that. That's the way that we want to try to make that happen as much as possible. Also, we'll leave the lobby open after class in case, you have a question or a comment, or you want to talk, or you want to connect with somebody, we'll leave that open as well, so we won't run away right away. And then we'll try to take a break, maybe halfway through, a little bit before 8 o'clock, so we can stand up or get some water or something like that. And then we don't think that there's any infallible interpretation of Scripture, that we're trying to learn together the life of Jesus, the words of Jesus, in order that it can help transform our lives and to make a difference in how we treat other people, and that it can have some relational reality and truth in our day-to-day lives, right? Not just to have more knowledge, but to actually put that into practice somehow. So that's our approach to this. And all comments, all questions, anything is welcome. You won't offend us. We have thick skin. We want to get after it. We want to seek the truth together. So that's kind of how we go. So what I'm going to do is try to finish out Matthew chapter 7 and then circle back to 5 and 6 and 7 for like almost a recap or reminders of some important things. We're almost at the end of 7, and then we want to start on chapter 8 after Thanksgiving. Do you want to read? Are you good to read? Okay. So if you want to follow along, like you're using a Bible app or a Bible, we're in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 7, and we're going to start at verse 13. And then we're going to carry on through the end of the chapter. Sarah's going to read, my beautiful, wonderful partner here, which is great. And we'll try to get through it, and then we'll come back and talk and do all sorts of discussion. Tonight, I hope to get people into conversations. So really feel free, to get out there and turn off the mute button and talk a little bit about this. But I'll try to call for that when it's time. So go ahead and read.
Okay. Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction. And those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. Beware of false prophets, who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorns, or figs from thistles? No, every sound tree bears good fruit, but the bad trees bear evil fruit. A sound tree cannot bear evil fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will know them by their fruits. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and do many mighty works in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you evildoer. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house upon the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon the house. But it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like the foolish man who built his house upon the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. And when Jesus finished these sayings, the crowds were astonished at his teachings, for he taught them as one who had authority and not as their scribes.
Okay. So what I'm going to try to do is we're going to discuss this and talk about this. This is not staged. We have not practiced this. I haven't given her a list of answers or anything like that.
Do you have my script?
Yeah, I have there's no script. This is not a performance. This is how we would be doing Bible study, and so that's kind of the best way that we can get ourselves to kind of what we're doing regularly. So basically, it's, the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction. This is verse 13. Now we use the Revised Standard Version. You can use any Bible that you want or you're comfortable with. There's no perfect translation. A lot of it's based upon, preference and that sort of thing. But so, Jesus he's been talking about the narrow gate. And he's been talking about the wide way and the easy way and the way of destruction. And then he's talking about what the narrow gate is, what the narrow way is and everything. And it's hard to find and it leads to life, and those who find it are few. And he's talking about, if you could recall, and this is for anybody too, not just for Sarah, but talk about or recall, anybody, for any of us or for you, what are some of the things that Jesus has described in the previous chapters that are ways that lead to destruction and ways that lead to life. And kind of, if you think about it, like, what's the easy path? What's the simple path? What everybody does? And then what's that hard way that really is kind of like, oh my gosh, most people are not going to do it this way, And so sometimes we can read scripture and think, let's find an answer somewhere.
Yeah.
But the answer, Jesus has been giving the answers to these questions. He's been giving the answer to narrow and wide and destruction and life. And so for anybody as well that is here, if you could recall anything, or now that you're thinking about it, what is the easy way? What's the hard way? What is the way that few are taking, et cetera, et cetera. So anybody have something? Throw a hand up there if you have something that you kind of recall over the past few chapters. Torrance, go ahead.
The first thing that came to mind is really the converse to the Beatitudes. It's like, well, or one can say all of the things the Beatitudes mention are really speaking to the narrower path. It's not a natural thing to be meek, to be merciful, pure of heart, peacemaker. Like, these aren't natural things. So, and just experience of people in general, most people are not these things. Therefore, if you are all these things, or really any one of them, you're likely to be on this narrow path where you're not in a lot of great company sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, so I have another, an easy example of that is at the end of chapter 5, it talks about, you have heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those that persecute you. If somebody does wrong to me, my first inclination, my natural response would be to push them away and to try to get back at them. That's going to be like what I naturally do, what my first reaction is going to be. But obviously I have to take the less traveled path of not just forgiving them, but praying for them, praying for somebody that may even continue, like, still be plotting evil against me. And that's so difficult.
Well, let me know if anybody else has their hand up too. But it is so important that as you're studying this and you're reading this, that you don't decide to determine or understand what the narrow way is, or destruction or life, based upon some ideas you have or some philosophy of the world, but read the context of what he's talking about. Jesus has been answering these questions and now he's summing it up. And a lot of times people are like, Jesus, Christians, you're so judgmental and you're so narrow and you're so exclusive and you're so, which can be true of Christians. But if you look at Jesus, he's describing. So let's even read those things that Torrance mentioned. So this is chapter 5. We'll read a few of these things. These are descriptions of the narrow way. These are descriptions of the hard path, but that lead to life, that lead to Jesus, that lead to freedom. This is chapter 5, verse 3. Poor in spirit, people who mourn, And really, mourning here is kind of like mourning is like mourning at sin. You know, a lot of times we look around and people are like, oh, no big deal. You know, there's rape and there's torture and there's murder and there's destruction. It's like people are like, ah, no big deal. Like, you know, you can't see it from my house. Like, it doesn't really affect them. And this isn't like just people that are sad because a friend died at a funeral. This type of mourning is twofold. It's mourning at the sin, the darkness, and the evil and the harm in the world. And so it's like, does that really affect you? Are you really like, do you care about injustice? Do you care about bad things happening to people? Do you care about all this? Or is it just like, oh, no big deal. I'm just going to go live my life and work and happy and be merry and everything's going well for me? And then also, do you mourn at your own sin and your own failures and your own frustrations? And then do you want to do anything about this?
Yeah.
So sometimes you get the idea that this just means like Jesus is saying, blessed are those who are sad. Well, no, not really, but you're sad at what?
Yeah, like it reminds me a little bit of like Mother Teresa was cut to the heart for other people's suffering.
Yeah. So people who hunger and thirst for righteousness, people who are merciful, people who are pure in heart, people who are peacemakers. So those are people of the narrow way. Those are people of that path that leads to life. And it's kind of like sometimes you think, oh my gosh, like, wait a minute, is Jesus trying to get people to is he being exclusive? Is he narrowing his focus? Is he saying that there's a lot of bad ways and only a few good ways? Well, I think that he kind of is. And if we look at this reality, there's not a lot of people that are choosing this path. This isn't something he's just making up arbitrarily. Like, I want to make it hard for you to have a relationship with God. But he's just saying there's not a lot of people, like Sarah said, that are going to love their neighbors. Most people are going to, or love their enemies even, or pray for those who persecute you. Most of them want to get back at. Most of us want revenge and not mercy, So anything else that's narrow way, or anybody have anything else? It's okay if we don't. Is there anybody else with their hand up? Okay, so basically that's it, So this is 13:14. Now we're back in chapter 7. So the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life. So Jesus has been describing all the things that lead to life. And one of them is just the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's the way that leads to life. So this is all relational reality. There's no theology, there's no doctrine, there's no high ecclesiastical words or churchianity, or you have to believe in the Trinity, this is like things like the golden rule is the narrow way that leads to life, really how you treat other people, how you act, and those sort of things. And that is what Jesus is trying to remind people of. Okay, so then he continues. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. I'm going to read this whole section again, and then be thinking about this for you or whoever. Is Jesus also, in the last few chapters, has been giving people examples of what false prophets are like. So then we're going to talk about that. Like, what do you remember is indicative or characteristic of a false prophet? What are the fruits of a false prophet? Because Jesus has been doing a lot of like, don't do this and do this. And this is terrible and hypocritical, and this is good and lovely and right and true. And so sometimes we think, oh, a false prophet is somebody that teaches bad theology. There's nothing about that here. But we'll remind ourselves, hopefully, as we discuss this, like, what are some things that these false prophets are doing, and get the answer from the text. Okay, so this is Matthew 7:15. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorns, or figs from thistles? So every sound tree bears good fruit, and the bad tree bears evil fruit. A sound tree cannot bear evil fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will know them by their fruits. Okay, so anybody have something that you remember from the past few chapters, or that comes to mind, that is like, oh, that's the bad fruit of a false prophet? What are some of those things that those Pharisees and hypocrites have been doing to people that Jesus is rebuking them and saying, hey, cut that out. That's not what God wants, you know. Anybody have anything that you remember from the past couple of weeks? Feel free to jump in there or unmute yourself or wave or anything. Sarah, if you have anything as well. So
I don't see anybody right now.
okay, so then do you have anything?
But yeah, I mean, like a couple times you mentioned hypocrites in your challenge of what to look for, and that reminded me of one of the things he said in chapter 6. He said, when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, that they may be seen by men.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's falsely, they're using like God's tools for the wrong purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, if anything comes to mind that are fruits or that are kind of indicators or characteristics of a false prophet, jump in there, raise your hand, or do whatever. But I think a lot of the things Jesus mentions is like, hey, when you're praying, don't get everybody's attention and say, I'm praying.
Mm-hmm.
You know, don't just say, oh, you know, I'm praying and pray all these crazy words and make everybody think you're very holy and mighty. And then he says, like, if you're giving to the poor, do that in secret. You know, so those are a couple indicators right now. Like, a false prophet is a person who is going to use poor people to make himself look good when he's pretending to be generous, mm-hmm. or, you know, sounding the trumpet or praying many, many words, you know. So those are a couple things that are like the fruits or something of a false prophet right there. And then he discusses all these different things. So those are some of them. And he's always saying, you know, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. A false prophet is somebody who does sacrifice, who pours himself out, whatever it is, but is not merciful to people.
Yeah.
You know, and a false prophet is somebody who doesn't forgive. You know, God calls us unconditional forgiveness for people. So a false prophet is somebody who's a teacher or a preacher or somebody who claims to be a Christian who says, well, you know, you don't forgive them for that, or you shouldn't forgive them for that, or you know, we really want to, you know, we want these guys to get what they deserve. Well, that's not a prophet of Jesus. You know, that's not somebody who's representing Jesus or God, because they're trying to show the job of a Christian, the job of anybody is to represent God to people and to let people know what God's heart is. And so one of the things is the importance of forgiveness and the importance of mercy and the importance of grace, you know. Mm-hmm. And so Jesus describes the characteristics of a peacemaker, the characteristics of somebody that's following the narrow way. And anybody who's not doing those is a false prophet. And it's not because they're not telling the future right, and it's not, they could have their theology perfect, but they're not loving people, and they're not gracious, and they're not forgiving, and they're not merciful, and they're drawing attention to themselves, and they're in it for greedy gain, and they're trying to make themselves look good. And, well, those are false prophets. Mm-hmm. And that's really, I think the church mixes that up, because we think if you make a mistake about God and you have some wrong theology, that's false prophets. Well, not according to Jesus and not according to the text. Now, of course, we do want to do our best to teach properly, but there's much more about loving properly and much more about forgiving and much more about mercy than there is about any statements of like about theology or doctrine.
Yeah.
You know?
So that was interesting that you said that about them, that they could even have the right theology, because I was talking to Amelia either this last Sunday or a Sunday before that about her, you know, as a Christian, sometimes your life is the only gospel that people ever see or ever experience. And so if your words are one thing, but you're actually living another, that could be a false prophet, because you could be teaching the right things, but people are going to look at your life and say, oh, okay, I see how the game is supposed to be played. No matter, you can do whatever you want as long as you're saying the right things. And then that is falsely teaching somebody about how Jesus wants us to live.
Yeah, and you know, I had a friend who sent me an article on somebody did this thing. They have too much time on their hands, but they looked at Christian pastors, especially at big churches, and they took pictures of their shoes, and then they checked how expensive their shoes are, And some of these pastors are up here of these big churches, and they're famous and they're popular, and they have shoes that are $5,000, $1,000, $500, $700. These flashy, showy sneakers, you know, and it's like, wow. I mean, now wait a minute. That doesn't seem to be following the humbleness and the Beatitudes. That seems to be showy. That seems to be something that is drawing attention to yourself, maybe showing how popular you are or how wealthy you are or something. But that to me is much more on the line of being somebody that's a false prophet, even though maybe they preach a great sermon, you know, because it's like, now it doesn't mean that, you know, you have to wear cardboard on your shoes, but if you have $15,000 sneakers like some of these guys do, you're missing the point, and you're not representing God very well to people, because this finds its way around the internet, and they say, wait, you're asking for us for money for poor people or missions, and you're wearing $1,000 sneakers.
Yeah.
And it seems like more of like showing you're cool or your status or something.
Yeah, I was
like
gonna say if you're a pastor and your sneakers cost more than $1,000 and you have church members that aren't eating.
Right. Yeah. And you're not, you know, so you kind of we kind of get the point, but if you think about that read the scripture and read the text and figure out what a false prophet is, and you get something very different than we've gotten through the history of the church. We've persecuted one another because we disagree on theology or baptism or the Lord's Supper or matters of doctrine and teaching, but we've allowed people to be greedy, or we've allowed people to be self-righteous, or, you know, all these different things, and then use the context of the scriptures and let Jesus fill out the descriptions, just like the narrow way and the way that leads to destruction and the easy way and those sort of things. Same thing with false prophets, you know, like that's so important there. All right, so we'll carry on. And then verse 21 is this terrible warning. And a lot of times people get this, they're like, wait a minute, you know, Christians do terrible things. People that call themselves Christians, they lie and they cheat and they're gossips and they're self-righteous, and they've even done terrible things like violence and persecution and abuse. And so what does that mean about God? And that Jesus answers this. And so this is such a warning that we should all get. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Once again, there's a lot more about action than there is about proper theology or doctrine or perfect teaching or perfect understanding. You know, people who do the will of the Father, which Jesus has been describing, right? Which is loving your enemy, praying for those who persecute you, following the golden rule. Doing those things is what makes you a son of God and a partner with Jesus, not having perfect understanding of everything, right? And not just saying I'm a Christian, but doing the things that Jesus tells you.
Which is so helpful to hear it in that way, you know, because you could say, you know, doing the will of the Father, and then you go, but how do I know what God's will for my life is? Well, no, Jesus has just said, hey, me and God are the same, and I want you to do these things. We want you to do these things. And so it's right there. What the will of the Lord has just been laid out in the last 2.5 chapters.
Yeah, not serving two masters, you know, just being sold out to Jesus, not being anxious about things, you know. I mean, we could just go on and on and on, but, you know, seeking first the kingdom of God, don't be worried about things. We could just continue to read this over and over again and think about something new that it means to be doing the will of the Father, but we get that understanding. And then he continues, you know, on that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, we did amazing things. We prophesied in your name. We cast out, I mean, you can do something that's so amazing and miraculous as casting out a demon in Jesus' name, but Jesus is saying, depart from me, I never knew you. That's an incredible warning, because you know what? The casting out of demons is not out of your power anyway. It's not because you're amazing. It's because there's power in the name of Jesus, and Jesus gives authority over those things. And so you could have been casting out, you could have known that the name of Jesus is powerful enough to cast out demon, and you do that, but you do it to look good.
Yeah.
Because people will be impressed by that. Well, now see, Jesus can work anyway, because he's still going to get that person cured of the demon. But you did it for pride, or maybe you did it for the right reasons, but you got prideful about it later. Or you did it for money. You charged them money, or there's a lot of ways that people have misused the name of Jesus. Well, you could do amazing and miraculous things, even so much as casting out demons. Jesus is saying, nope, that's not what it's all about.
That's a scary thought.
That is a scary thought, because that would be, you would almost be like, man, anybody who can cast out demons in the name of Jesus, they're going to make it. No, the warning is there. And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you evildoers. Well, Jesus answers the question about fraud and about hypocrites and about evil things done in the name of Christianity. And it's just like, no, those aren't Christians.
Yeah. Did somebody want to say something?
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say something about the, in Cost of Discipleship. He kind of Bonhoeffer kind of likens the acts of obedience as critical to your salvation, but remember that it is you taking part of God's work and not you executing the will of God yourself. And that's where people get, like, if they're casting out demons, if they're even speaking in tongues or preaching the gospel or whatever it is, they take it as, they take it as something that, okay, this shows how good I am. But we should be constantly reminded that it's going to happen anyway. That's what I wanted to touch on. The fact that you said, the demon will be cast out. That person's life, it can still be saved without you. So you should be thankful that you have the opportunity to serve. And then
God will work despite us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not because of us. Yeah, that's good. And so we just should be blown away. There's just, we could keep going through this over and over again, and we would get more every time, or we would learn something, or we'd be challenged, but this whole thing that Jesus is addressing the concern that everybody has, which is, hey, what do we do about bad Christians? What do we do about people that have abused people, or that did the Inquisition or the Crusades, or priests that abused people, or people that killed people in the name of Christians or something? And Jesus is saying, sorry, just because you claim to follow me does not mean you really are even included. In fact, I'm going to say, no, I reject you. And so Jesus is saying, I reject the frauds and the hypocrites and the false prophets. And once again, this is not so much about people that made a mistake in their teaching. Like, you may get something a little bit wrong. That's not so much what it's about, but it's like people that have done things or not done things, and been prideful and been self-righteous, or say, oh yeah, I love you, Jesus, but they're just sold out to money. That's their God is money. Or all these, I've just gathered attention for themselves and love the poor because it made them. And we can all do good things for people because it makes us look good. And Jesus is just rejecting that, and he's very. To me, it gives me great relief, because there's that question, like, man, Christians have done some terrible things in the name of Christ. Does that mean God is bad? Does that mean Jesus is bad? Does that mean the Bible's corrupt? But I'm very thankful that Jesus addresses this, because somebody can say, I can say, no, they weren't Christians. Yeah. They were violent to people. They persecuted Christians and other Christians, and they persecuted other people as well, but they just weren't being Christian. Now, we don't know where they're going to end up. There's a lot of grace, but when they were doing that, they weren't representing God. They weren't doing his will, And because you read right here, forgive your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, love your enemies, okay? Forgive and you will be forgiven. So we know what the will of God is. It's how you treat other people, even your enemies. So you can't be a Christian and justify getting back revenge at your enemies. It's not there. It just violates. It's just pretty simple. It just violates it.
Yeah, and in fact, that is another narrow versus wide way, because it's when, if I do like some great work and everyone's like, wow, Sarah, that's amazing. It is so difficult for me just in my heart to not kind of puff up a little bit and be like, yeah, that's right. That is pretty cool that I did that, instead of just saying, no, all glory be to God. It was only, he did this through me. That's much more difficult to do that than to just say, yeah, a little bit, let me pop my collar a little bit. And
Okay, well, it's 8. Let's take a quick stand up and just like stretch it out, move or whatever it is. If you need to go to the restroom real quick or grab some water, because my clock is going to chime and that's nice and loud. We'll give ourselves about 2 minutes and then we'll come back. We're not done, I promise. There's a second half, and we will finish chapter 7. Feel free to talk or say hi or whatever right now. So. Now you all get to look in like the inner sanctum. So this is my study. This is like late night study, hang out here in the inner sanctum. So it's you guys got all like a little peek into my world. So I'm trying to see who I see. So I can't see everybody. Like everyone has photos up, which is cool. So it's awesome that everybody's here, and even Pastor Barb, while she's traveling, she's still making things happen because we couldn't, for some reason, we had an issue with the hosting and everything. So, but
Jack,
yeah.
time we opened every book in your office looking for your passport.
No, I haven't opened every book, but like I said, it'll come up, of course. Like someday I'll wonder, I'll like doing something and that passport will come. So at least I have a backup. So I'll be right back. 30 more seconds. All right, so we're back. I see some real faces back instead of photos, which is great. So, because that's good. And of course, we love to see everybody. So if you can, put yourself on camera, that's super cool, even if you're not talking, because it's kind of fun to see who's showing up. So,
Amelia, we know you would if you could, but we miss your face.
Yeah. Okay, so I promise we'll get to the end of chapter 7, and then we'll talk a little bit. But this is what you have to do for the next section, is that, you have to use your imagination, and you have to have fun in a serious way. And you have to understand that this is not some beautiful, perfect, holy book that we have to read under perfect lighting, and we have to speak a wonderful voice, and we have, reverent and like, so, because you miss the humanity of it. And this next section is dripping with irony and dripping with sarcasm, but is really intentional for Jesus to get through of how absurd this situation is. He's kind of saying, like, this is such a hyperbole and exaggeration of like the narrow way versus the easy path, and what people are. And I mean, when you have so much talk about being foolish, you can't just take that seriously. I mean, like, this is like the story of the three little pigs. If you know the story of the three little pigs, which is like the big bad wolf and the three little pigs and the house of straw and the house of sticks and then the house of bricks. Like, you're reading that. I read that to my 3-year-old daughter, and it's a joke, and you huff and puff like the wolf is, but you can't take that seriously. So we turn Christianity and the Bible into religion and into ritual and into sacrament and so seriousness that we suck the real life out of it. And so here you go. So every man who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house upon the rock. Okay. Also, what we do here is we use this verse like for our own security. And so we say, everybody who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house upon the rock. And then we just forget the last 3 chapters we've read. We just make up something different. Everybody who is peaceful or who is nice or who is kind or who is polite or who is tolerant or, every man who is self-sufficient or, gets a good job and a good promotion. Like, we just take this now out of context and we don't remember that he's been describing what it means to hear the words and what the words were and what it means to do them, right?
It's not just going, what did you say, Jesus?
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to be content in my heart.
Right, I have a warm, fuzzy feeling about Jesus, and that's what he wants, okay? But he's choosing these words because he's hammering home the point. This is like the end of the sermon. We're wrapping it up, bringing it home, right? Coming to my close. Like, this is the punchline. He's getting to it, okay? So everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man. Okay, so we're contrasting wise and fools. Okay, who built his house upon the rock. Me, the rock, my truth, the things I've said. The narrow way that leads to life. The blessed are the poor in spirit. The blessed are those who forgive. Loving your enemies. The golden rule. All these things. The rain fell. And the floods came, and the wind blew and beat upon that house, and it did not fall, because it had been founded upon the rock. Think of the 3 little pigs. The big bad wolf blows the house down, because storms are going to come, troubles are going to come, difficulties are going to come. If anybody promises you that being a Christian means everything's going to be roses and success and wonderful, and everything's going to be great, and God's going to protect you and take care of you, and there'll be no troubles, and I'll just be honest, they're just lying to you. It's just not the case. But Jesus is saying all that's going to come. If you remember in chapter 5, people will persecute you and they'll revile you. If you're a peacemaker and you follow Jesus and you're sold out, there's going to be stuff that's going to come your way. Mm-hmm. But if you've built your house, if you've chosen the narrow way, if you've chosen the way of life, if you are a peacemaker, if you're doing it Jesus' way, if you're loving your enemies, if you've banked upon Jesus and are trusting God, then when all what's going to happen, which will happen, when it comes, the house is not going to fall. It'll stand because it's been founded upon the rock. And now here's the opposite. Okay, now this is like don't think serious. Don't just think 3 little pigs. Think cartoon. Okay. And everyone who hears these words of mine, so we just listen, la, 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 okay? Is like a foolish man who built his house upon the sand. Now, if you've ever seen a sand castle or a house of cards or anything, like, you can make a good-looking house in sand. Mm-hmm. A dream castle. Mm-hmm. And it looks secure, and it looks safe, and it looks beautiful and everything, right? And the rains fell, which will happen. The floods came and the winds blew, beat against that house, and it fell. And great was the fall of it. I mean, it is great. Like, it is a spectacle, because if you've ever seen a sandcastle and it gets wiped away by a wave, it's amazing. I mean, it is gone. It is there, this big, majestic, amazing thing, and then the next second, it is just gone. It is just flattened, you know. And well, that's an absurdly silly image. I mean, first of all, even if you didn't build your house out of sand, you never would build your house on sand.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's like, well, duh. I mean, you know, so Jesus is using sarcasm and hyperbole and exaggeration, and he's just making the point so absurdly that it's like, and he's telling you the ways to build your house upon the sand and the ways to build upon the rock. And the last few chapters have been describing the difference between the foolish way and the wise way, the sand and the rock. You know, wanting the reward of humans. You want people to recognize you for your good work.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, I know one of the things we've been working on is actually breaking these words down so that you can actually apply them to situations into life. And I think that that's one of the things, you know, when you're talking about this, Jesus is not wanting us to hear him say this about building your house upon the rock or building your house upon the sand and going, oh, yes, Jesus, that is very wise, very true. You know, that's not what he's wanting. What he's wanting is for us to say, okay, what he has taught us, everything that he has said before this is a solid foundation to build your life on, is to build your life and your relationships on. Follow this foundation that I've given you of loving your enemies, of letting your words be true, of, you know, not practicing piety before men. All of these things are a solid foundation to build your life on, and and a solid foundation for operating your relationships, because that is going to, when the storm comes, that's going to hold solid.
Yeah, it's, you know, and great was the fall. We've all seen great falls. I mean, you know, there's great falls of even great people that have claimed to be Christian, you know, and people watch the spectacle happen, you know, somebody that's exposed to be a hypocrite or a liar or have something wrong with them, you know, and great is the fall. And that just wise and foolish, you know. And so it's kind of like sometimes we think, well, Jesus is super judgmental, or God is judgmental and intolerant and exclusive and hateful. Well, it's kind of like, yeah, he's saying, hey, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Well, is that judgy? Kind of. I mean, yeah, it really is, but it seems like a pretty good way to live. And that's a relational reality. It's like Christians get judgy, I think, about all the wrong things. They get intolerant about all the wrong things. They get exclusive about all the wrong things. And it's usually, you know, self-righteous, hypocritical, prideful things, ideas about doctrine, ideas about theology, ideas about teaching, you know, what Bible you use, which church you go to, what do you believe about baptism, what do you believe about Lord's Supper, and gets really judgy for people that have failed, you know, and says, well, sorry, you know, you failed, and, you know, you did drugs, or, you know, you had sex, or, you know, you're living a lifestyle we don't approve of, and how dare you. And then they allow somebody to be self-righteous or prideful, or, you know, something like that. And so, or they're like, well, you know, you use the wrong Bible, or, you know, you have a tattoo, or you drink beer or smoke a cigar or something like that. Very legalistic, very religious, very, you know, and it's like Jesus is is judgy about some things and intolerant and exclusive, but they all make the world a better place.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, well, yeah, loving your enemies is better than murdering them.
Yeah.
Forgiving someone and praying for those who persecute you is better than wanting revenge on them. You know, peacemaking is better than war making. I mean, the judgments that Jesus made, well, yeah, it is very much saying there's a right way and there's a wrong way. There's a foolish way and there's a wise way. And so we have to just weigh the words of Jesus and put them into relational context and see, hey, how does that work out? You know, it's kind of like, how dare God make rules for people, like the 10 Commandments? Well, it's kind of like, yeah, there's a little bit of something there that's judgmental, but it's like, hey, if you're married to me, right? Well, isn't it better should I lie to you or tell you the truth?
I would prefer tell me the truth, please.
Yeah, well, that's very judgmental of you and intolerant. I mean, well, God and Jesus are both death on what destroys relationships, and lying destroys relationships. How about bearing false witness? Okay, should I make up false accusations about you?
No.
Okay, well, that's happened before. We look at culture, there's false accusations have been levied, and a person goes to jail, and an innocent person goes to jail because people accuse them falsely. So, well, that Jesus and God are saying there's a path, and it's the honorable path, and what you don't make false accusations, and you don't lie to people, and you know what? If you're married to somebody, you be faithful to them. I don't think that you want me cheating on you, because that's not a way to relationships, right? And hey, treat me the way you want to be treated, and so on and so forth. So if you look at even how God is helping develop and reveal himself and begin to make a difference to people, and then you fast forward to how Jesus carries on that tradition, it's all about relational truth. And it's all about, it really is in one sense saying, yeah, there's a way that's really easy. Anybody can do it, but it's ultimately sand. It's ultimately a house built upon sand. But there's this hard way that people who follow me want to do, and that is the solid thing. And that's going to that's really going to harbor you and give you refuge and safety. And these other ways are not, money's not going to save you.
Yeah.
Even if you have $1 billion, you're going to live 80 or 90 years. And even if you have $1 billion, you might not live that. Kobe Bryant was in a helicopter crash and died, and he's a multi-millionaire, probably a billionaire. It's just, it's not going to be a thing that's going to save you or makes the difference. And if you make money your God, well, then you really going to leave other people in the dust, and you don't have room for God in the first place. So I think,
so even the commandment of, God says, you shall not put no other God before me. Even that is not, because people go, well, that sounds really like jealous and it's off-putting. But no, if you put the God of money in front of God, then you are going to lie, cheat, and steal, and you're not going to have good relationships. So putting the right God first is going to clear the way for you to follow the rest of the commandments.
Yeah, and we have to put this all together, that Jesus is beginning his ministry, and he's giving this incredible vision for how humanity ought to be. And he's talking about this is the way to life, and he's describing what the characteristics are of people that are going to be following him. And so often Christians have a bad name because they haven't represented Jesus well.
Yeah.
And it's legitimate for people to be critical of Christians. All the time I see, like this thing that my friend sent me about the pastors. You're up there talking about Jesus, who says, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And you got $15,000 sneakers on. I want to go, oh my gosh, like, don't be a pastor.
Yeah.
Don't. Now listen, I don't think he's going to hell. I don't know what his heart is and his ministry is. Maybe he's being misled. Maybe he thinks that is helping him reach people. I'm not just condemning him for that, but I'm saying Christians legitimately do things that I am just like, oh no, that doesn't represent God well. But if we could all focus on these few verses and realize that Jesus is giving us a roadmap of what it means to be representative of God and to reflect who God is. Because if you're a Christian, you're a person who says, well, first of all, I've been forgiven, so I forgive other people. I'm a big screw up. I'm the chief of sinners. I've done a lot of bad things. I have darkness and evil. I have skeletons in my closet. I have secrets I don't want anybody to know.
Yeah.
And the fact that I would tell you, well, you shouldn't steal, and you shouldn't cheat, and you shouldn't lie, and you shouldn't false witness, and you know what, you should love your enemies. It doesn't mean that I'm perfect at all that, It just means that I know that those are the way that leads to good relationships with other
Yeah.
people and with God. So a Christian is one that can hold up the ideals of Jesus without looking down on another person. And a Christian is a person who says, your standing with God is that you're forgiven. You don't have to do anything to earn the love of God. You are forgiven. He accepts you the way that you are. He doesn't want you to stay that way. Read these 3 chapters. He loves you and forgives you and wants you to love and forgive other people. And he loves you just the way you are. And there's no prerequisite. But he wants to change you.
Yeah.
He wants you to overcome your natural desires and your natural inclinations and your natural proclivities, which are all selfish. Me, 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 me. I want, I want, I want. And then, so a Christian is helping other people say, this is what God is like. If you experience me, if you experience my church, if you encounter me, you're going to get grace, and you're going to get mercy, and you're going to get peacemaking, and you're going to get meekness, and you're going to get judgment, but judgment with mercy and judgment about real things, right? Not condemnation.
Yeah.
But the type of judgment that cares about a person, like your life is going off the rails, you're going to end up in destruction. You know, you're not loving your wife and kids because you're at your job for 80 hours a week, you know. You're not forgiving people, and you're harboring hatred for them, and it's ruining your life, and it's ruining your relationship. Hey, don't cheat on your wife. Hey, don't lie to your best friend, you know, and come and join us as we try to do things differently. And so this is this is the beginning of Jesus saying, well, hey, if you want to be a follower of me, this is what it's like. And in fact, there's a lot of people that claim they're doing it and are not doing a good job.
Yeah.
And he's identifying that right away, you know. So, but then if you want to do a good job, you can follow Jesus and be a good follower and do a good job and give him a good reputation.
Yeah.
And reunite people, because what Jesus wanted to do is give us a chance to have a right relationship with God. And that's what he means by being saved. If you and I are on the outs and we've done something wrong and we're about to get a divorce, and somebody comes in and helps us and says, no, try this, no, do this, no, Jack, love your wife this way. You know, hey, stop lying to her, stop cheating on her, stop telling other people bad things, stop gossiping, you know. And I could say, well, that's really judgy of you. That's really intolerant of you. You mean like I can't do all that stuff? That's kind of exclusive. Well, if somehow I turned it around and you were to accept me back and our relationship was good again, our relationship would have been saved.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Jesus is talking about, that we have a relationship with God that seems to be broken, and with other people it seems to be broken. And Jesus is helping us say, I would like that relationship to be saved. And we want, as Christians, to let people know who God is. And God is loving, and God is kind, and God is compassionate, and God is gracious. And he wants to save us from ourselves, and he wants to have a relationship with us by which we can now have a saved relationship. The relationship is dead, and we save it, you know. And then Jesus is outlining what it means to be a Christian, what it means to be a follower of God, what it means to be a peacemaker, what it means to be all these different things. And that's why he's saying that's a narrow road, because that's hard.
Yeah.
Not easy to do. You know, I think that it is a big challenge, because we always want to look out for ourselves. You know, I mean, I personally want justice for my enemies. I want them to get what they deserve.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I want grace for me. I want forgiveness for me. I want understanding for me, but I kind of want other people to get what they deserve, you know? And so that is getting to the end of Matthew 5, 6, and 7, this most famous Sermon on the Mount, and all this wild and crazy stuff that Jesus is calling people to. You know, I don't even know how anybody stuck around. Like, after you get this, you're just like, who stayed? Well,
Yeah.
I guess there was hundreds of people there, and only 12 really stayed at that time. You know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I'm sure people are going, whoa, I just signed up to be healed and get a meal, dude.
Right. So, does anybody have any comments or questions they want to say, Torrance?
What? Oh, because I clicked the unmute. Is that what?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I was just saying, yeah, I mean, I don't get how a bunch of people, stuck around, except for, the miracles. Some people are just compelled. Like like they talk a lot about that in Bonhoeffer's book about how Jesus just said, "Follow me,"
Yeah.
and this is pre miracles. This is pre.
Right.
They may have heard about these things, but they haven't seen it necessarily. Until you see this one. Okay, this guy can make fish come out of water. Am I going to change my life for this? Like, what made them really obey? What made them really drop everything and leave? So it's
Yeah.
Yeah. So does anybody have any questions or comments? Was something particularly helpful to hear? Is something still confusing?
well, I can say it was really helpful. About worshiping money and a lot of times you can let that go past
Mhm.
by saying, I don't worship money. But I think Scott put it best last time. He says it's your security
Right.
worshiping.
Yeah.
And a lot of people mask that thirst for money and by calling it security. And people say, oh, okay, well, everybody wants to take care of their family and make sure things, are there. But really, you're resting on money to take care of your family. You're relying on cash to provide security for your family. And it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
And then relying upon yourself ultimately, right? Because I
Yeah.
can do something to provide this for my family, and it really leaves other people out of the loop too, because you don't really lean on anybody else. It's just something that that you're saying, well, and then you're sold out to it, of course, because that becomes such a vital and important thing.
Yeah.
Oh, Jack.
And
leaning on people is not the American way.
yeah, and then remember, so as God especially has been teaching us that one of the things Jesus is doing is he's saying, well, if you want to begin to adopt and adapt my way of doing things, the Lord's Prayer becomes something you say together with other people that you're committed with, that you're partnering with to make this happen, and you say it like a pledge. If you've ever been to church or you grew up in church or something, you hear this Lord's Prayer and it just becomes a ritual. It just becomes like something that you just blah, 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 blah. You just memorize it in it. But you say it like a pledge, like a vow, like you would a marriage vow. Because if you're going to be a peacemaker in Jesus' army, you're going to follow Jesus, you have to give up some things. I mean, it's like marriage. Well, marriage is both freeing and restricting. You do give up a lot of things, but you gain a lot of things. And that's through promise and through pledge and through commitment. Anything worthwhile, is that way, right? And so, you forsake all other women because I'm choosing you. Well, that's a restriction and that's exclusive and and it's in one sense judgmental because I'm judging everybody else and saying, well, you're the one, and it's exclusive because I'm saying nobody else but you, and it's, and there's things that we won't tolerate, right? And we make pledges and commitment, but that's the way relationship happens: deep, long, strength, commitments, right? And so then we take this Lord's Prayer, and this is the pledge and the oath and the commitment of people that want to do the will of Jesus, not just who claim Christ, but that really want to do it. And so you say, Our Father, us, not me, us, right? Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. That's a pledge that means I'm going to make you look good. I wear a cross around my neck. If you experience me, you ought to say, man, the God that you serve is a good God. He's gracious and tolerant and forgiving and loving and compassionate and wants to love people. And that Jesus seems like somebody I'd like to get to know. That's what it means for the name of God to be hallowed, or that he looks good to other people as they experience you. But so often people have the opposite experience. And remember, Jesus deals with it, says, hey, sorry, not my people. people who make Jesus look good, those are my people. They do the will of the Father. And I've been outlining what that looks like, right? Okay. So then, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. He's been talking about the kingdom and the will. Loving your enemies, doing to others as they would do unto you, meek, merciful, poor in spirit, hunger and thirsting for righteousness, trusting upon God, right? Not being in it for looking good, right? Not giving money to the poor because you get a plaque on the wall or people see you, right? Jesus has been talking about what these things look like. So let the context of these 3 chapters pour into words like this. Give us this day our daily bread, provide for us. Simple. And for other people too. And then forgive us our debts, as we have also forgiven our debtors. We're making a contract to forgive people. And there's no qualification, there's no conditions. If we are a person who believes God has forgiven us for all the things that we've done, that we've broken that relationship and it's restored because of what Jesus has done for us, then we also have an obligation. God forgives us as we forgive other people. The valve that opens God's forgiveness opens to the extent that we forgive other people. If we have shut the valve of forgiveness for somebody, the valve of forgiveness from God shuts, because it seems to be something that works simultaneously in conjunction here. And there's no conditions. You just forgive people because you've been forgiven. And that's a hard pill to swallow. And that is, I would say, one of the marks of a true Christian is the one person that can forgive anybody of anything. And it doesn't mean it wasn't a big deal. Mm-hmm. It just means you're still willing to forgive them because you want them to know that God also forgives them, and you want them to trust in that and believe in that. And that's an amazing thing. And lead us not into temptation. What is the temptation? The temptation is to not forgive. The temptations have been outlined in this. The temptation is to have your security in money and to serve that. The temptation is to do good things to make yourself look good. The temptation is to not trust God and to be anxious. The temptation is to try to fit God in, serving 2 masters. Well, I'm going to fit God in on the weekends, but really I'm going to be sold out to career or romance or something like that. And but deliver us from harm, So, and then he says again about this forgiveness. And so I think that we'll probably leave it there.
Well,
go ahead.
I was thinking of this Lord's Prayer real quick, and how you can make it like you said, like a vow or something, like a wedding vow, just saying like God who loves all of us, not just me. I want to make your name look good.
Right.
I want God. I promise to live into you being my king and following what your will is on earth, just like it is in heaven. So Lord, I promise that I'm going to be satisfied with what you're providing for me today and not look towards what I want you to provide for the future. And Father, I promise to forgive people to the extent that I would want you to forgive me, to the extent that I expect you to forgive me. And I promise, Lord, to let you lead me away from temptation, because he wants to. He doesn't. I promise to let you lead me away from temptation, just like I promise to let you pull me away from evil.
Yeah, and the temptation there is not like eating too many chocolate donuts. The temptation is the things he's been going over.
Yeah. Well, temptation is I want to be faithful to our marriage, so I'm not going to be in a situation where I'm not going to be, with my clothes off drinking alcohol with some guy. Because as much as my will would be to not do that, I've compromised myself, and that's temptation, and sometimes that overpowers us. And so I'm not even going to be in that situation, and that's part of how I'm going to be faithful to you.
Well, you can give my wife a hand because she had to listen to me talk for like an hour and a half. So good job for Sarah. Glad you were here. Thank you for hanging out and hosting.
Yeah.
We'll leave the lobby open. If anybody has comments or questions, feel free to share them. If you want to hang out and talk, What?
Tito's clapping.
Okay. And then next Thursday, we will not have Bible study because it's Thanksgiving. So we'll all be passed out after all the turkey. But if you happen to be in the South Bay area, we have Sunday morning social distance Bible study, which means we get together, we have coffee and donuts. It's very casual, just like this. And we talk sometimes about the Thursday topic, sometimes about something else. Sometimes we hardly open a Bible. We just get together just to be together because in these times, we wear masks, we do all that stuff. So that's Sunday morning right here in Gardena. So just get a hold of somebody. We'd love to have you come join, even if for a little bit. And just so we can get together and just mostly encourage one another and say hi and stay connected and eat a lot of donuts and drink a lot of coffee, of course, but just see one another. And then the other thing is, like, we have this great world of technology. So if you are interested if you have more questions about Jesus, about the scripture, about Christianity, about the history of the church, about philosophy or science or anything, like I would love to spend time answering those questions. Sometimes it's hard in a big group because just whatever, you don't know people that well and there's 12 or 13 people here, but there's no question that would be offensive to me. And would love to sit down and talk and chat. Like we could do it in person, sit outside, have a mask on, or over Zoom. So if you want to study more, if you have questions, whatever that may be, please don't hesitate to let me or somebody know here from the church, or just message us on the website or Facebook or something like that, because that would be amazing. We'd love that opportunity. And I think that, we're just beggars showing other beggars where to find bread, and we think that this book and this guy are worth paying attention to, and that if more people lived like Sermon on the Mount here, the world would be a better place, And so we'll just give you that invitation, and that's what we're trying to do together, is to be student followers or disciples of Jesus, and to love our enemies and to treat other people the way we want to be treated, and help people understand who God really is and who Jesus really is. So anyway, take us up at the invitation. Like, you may have a challenge. You may say, I think this is a bunch of crap, and you sound like you're just making stuff up. Put that challenge out there. Let's talk about it. Anything is totally welcome. Would love to be able to do that. And it's great to have everybody here. I'm thankful for Zoom and thankful for, Sarah and all that stuff. So otherwise, we don't see on Sunday, we'll see in 2 weeks on Thursday night, because that's when we have our next Bible study. Yep. So
happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Great to have you all tuned in. So thanks for coming. And everybody, Tito, it's great to have you here. I'm glad you're hanging out. Matt, awesome. We'll see you next time for training too. Thanks for coming, man. It was super cool to have you join us tonight.
So, Hiram, you got that next week. We're not having it, right? I want to make sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
See
yeah, we see people from all over the world, right? We got Mexico and Myanmar and everybody. Miriam, if you're there, thanks for coming again. It was wonderful to have you with us. And Amelia, we'll maybe see you Sunday. So,
Mama G.
Yeah, Miriam, Jose sends his greetings.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was wondering, he told me he was going to be here on this session.
There's just we all can't fit on here, so sometimes we take turns because there wasn't enough. So sorry about that, but he may be able to come and just say hi real quick. I don't know where
I haven't seen him, but
okay.
Somebody yells for him. He's probably here somewhere.
He's so we also have a study right now, Miriam, on the book of Ruth. So he's in that.
Okay.
But he'll probably be here next time. And then if you, I don't know if you're talking with Sarah, but then, next time let her know if you're going to be here. We'll make sure he hops on, because we could go through. So sorry about him not being here. No
worries. Thank you.
Yeah, it was great. And what about Thanksgiving plans? Miriam, you got any Thanksgiving plans, or what does it look like? I know we're all in crazy lockdown right now.
We're supposed to have not fully a Thanksgiving meal, but it's supposed to be like just us in the yard and having a little bit of something to eat.
Good.
That's
Good.
exactly what we're doing. We're going to try to go deliver some meals, because usually on Thanksgiving we have our church building in El Segundo. We bring in like seniors and lonely folks and people that don't have a place to go. Sometimes students who are, maybe they're here on exchange and they're far from home, and then we all have a meal together, like 50, 60 people. Well, not this year, so we're going to try to deliver some meals this year, drop off some food, make some, at least so people get some kind of some home cooked meals and they don't have to have their McDonald's delivered or something.
Is that because I heard something, I didn't fully check it, about there's like a curfew or they're limiting people now?
Right, yeah, and they're not wanting indoor gatherings, especially like at church buildings. So we can't have the big group we normally have at our church buildings. So we're just gonna at least try to deliver some meals and say hi to people and drop off a nice home cooked meal. So that's what we're gonna try.
Okay, well that's
But
so nice.
all these crazy restrictions, so it's a bummer. And but yeah, if you ever have a Sunday, and you wanna, I know you're somewhere in LA, right?
Yeah, I'm like in between Koreatown and East Hollywood.
Okay, yeah. I actually, well, before COVID, I taught up there, like Pico and Olympic. I taught at a little college up there, but now it's all online. So right by Koreatown. So
Yeah, Olympic, that would be like the heart of Koreatown, yeah.
yeah. So well, if you ever want on a Sunday morning to come have coffee and donuts and hang out, let us know. We'd love to have you and see your face even through a mask. So if you ever want to, that would be great. So, but it was awesome to have you here tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So.
Hi, Beefy.
Hey, Beefy.
Oh, I have to
Hi,
do-
sir. Yeah,
And
we don't celebrate Thanksgiving Day, so yeah, I don't have any plan.
Matt,
But you
Matt,
can
are you
still give thanks.
Matt, are you still there? Do I see you?
Yeah.
It is not the same.
Yeah.
Hey, Matt, it was super cool to have you with us, dude. Like 2 days in a row, last night and today. I'm glad you joined.
Thank you. I loved it.
Good. Well, I don't know if you guys are going to come on Sunday, but of course, if you and your sister or whatever want to come check it out, eat some donuts and have some coffee, and we'll get to talking. We'll be there, so.
Oh, thank you, Pastor. I really appreciate it. She seemed curious about the study, so
Good.
maybe I'd bring her along.
You do it, yeah. Have a ride shotgun, and we'll make some really good coffee and hang out a little bit. And so like I said, sometimes we don't even pick up. As you know, when you were there, sometimes we don't even pick up the Bible. It's just more of a get together to just encourage and talk. So it'd be great to have her connect with some folks. So
No, I really liked it. It's very comfortable there, and
good.
It's just I like the approach. I really do.
Good, man. Well, maybe Sunday. If not, train. Well, I guess we won't train next week. So if we don't see you Sunday, we'll see you like after that for training and all that. So
For sure, man. Thank you. For sure.
Yeah, and if you of course, if you have any questions or you want to talk about anything, give me a holler. You got my number. So okay.